I slept with a group of coworkers on our business trip. My husband exposed me during family dinner. I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. Actually, I'm still trying to process how so many years of my life just went down the drain so quickly. To get this to even make sense at all took a lot of edits and a couple of rewrites. And usually, I wouldn't have had the time for this, but right now, time is all I have on my hands now. I'm getting impatient, waiting to know what my fate would be. I'm writing this to just pass time and offload myself of my worries. I used to be a fairly talented writer, but you could say I fell out of practice years ago, and I'm not even trying to make this sound sweet or anything. I did. Something horrible. A series of horrible things, rather. And I don't know if my husband and even my daughter, when she grows to find out the truth, will ever forgive me. I'm sharing this here with full knowledge that many of you will probably despise me for the things I did, and the audacity to try to justify some of them. My husband, Jeremiah, and I were married for 12 years. During that time, we had a daughter together, but she's just 7 now. Getting pregnant was a problem at some point, so how Jessie even came along is still a mystery to us. But she's also the best gift we could have asked for, and I'm only sad that I didn't get to realize that sooner and treat her more like the princess she is. In fact, I barely even spent any time with her, and I regret that so much. But that's not exactly why I'm here. I fucked up big time, and although I didn't see that sooner, or maybe I saw and knew what I was doing, but just choose to ignore it. Either way, now the writing on the wall is pretty clear to me. It's a bit too late, but yeah, not like I get to choose, right? So, typically our marriage was stable in the beginning. Like I said, we had no kids at first, and I guess that kind of made things easier. We had more time on our hands, a lot of freedom, fewer responsibilities, less financial pressure, etc. We tried to spend more time together, and at first that seemed to be working for us. We were newlyweds, so naturally we'd have time for each other. But as the first year ran out, I started getting busy, too busy. I spent late nights at the office, and as soon as it was dawn, I was out of the house again. Jeremiah had a job too, but I earned about 3 times his salary. I worked in finance, and I worked really, really hard. I mean, who wouldn't? I was in a field dominated by the other gender. Of course I worked twice, even thrice as hard just to prove myself. It's not that I wasn't good or smart enough. In fact, I was smarter than most men in the boardroom. But being smart wasn't enough. Maybe it's because they actually feared that I was better than them. I don't know. But I never had a voice. Not in one-on-one conversations with my bosses, and definitely not at board meetings either. I always got talked over at such meetings anyway. And whenever I managed to voice something out, a male coworker would always find a way to puncture or critique my suggestion. But when one of them suggested something dumber, they all took it like it was the smartest thing they'd heard all week. I'm not saying all this to justify my actions, no. I'm just airing out my feelings is all. I know some of you may have been in such situations, so ordinarily, you can relate to my situation and maybe even understand why this struggle pushed me into trouble. Despite how much I earned, Jeremiah still played his role as the sole provider. In fact, it's not that I didn't want to help, but he insisted on it. We lived in a rented apartment when I had a well-furnished house of my own. For 3 years of our marriage, I tried to convince Jeremiah to move in with me into the house, but he refused. But I kind of admire him for that. It wasn't that he had an inferiority complex, he just had a sense of responsibility. After years of renting an apartment, he finally finished up the building of our marital home and we moved in. Because my husband did everything, most of what I did with my money was redo our home decor over and over again, get groceries for the house, and give our cook the occasional weekly allowance. I didn't pay her salary because Jeremiah did that already, along with the gardener and cleaner's pay as well. I rarely went shopping because I didn't have the time, but when I did go, I did it big. I got the best outfits and jewelry for myself, even though I hardly ever used them. I gave some money to charity and occasionally put some in Jessie's college fund. So, yeah, Jeremiah was the sole breadwinner of the family, and I was the support who was hardly ever at home. We started having problems way before now, even before Jessie came into the picture. I got my big job a couple of months before his proposal, so he wasn't used to the hard worker I had become. I was admittedly a workaholic, and I guess my husband didn't like it that I worked so hard when I had him. It got so bad that we had this big fight that made me leave the house for like a week. We were about 5 years into our marriage, and I had come home late one night as per usual. Except it was our anniversary, and typically it was date night too. I was just so exhausted and preoccupied with work that day that it slipped my mind. I didn't even open the note that was attached to the flower. Bouquet he sent me earlier, and we didn't see that morning either, because I leave for work so early. So Jeremiah was really mad when I got back close to midnight that day, especially after ignoring his texts and not even acknowledging his romantic gesture. I mean, I would be pissed too, but I was so exhausted that day that I might have forgotten he was human too, and had feelings. Plus, when he noticed that I was showing no interest in what he had to say, he started yelling. I also got angry and started yelling back. I felt like he wasn't in support of my work and had no interest in my dreams and passions, so I stormed out in the middle of it all, and that was the beginning of all my problems. I didn't move to the house I owned because I didn't want my husband to find me. I moved into a hotel room not too far from my office. I couldn't cope with Jeremiah that week. I had too much on my plate, and I knew what he wanted was for me to relax a bit. But I couldn't do that week. I managed to be put on a team working on a year-end financial report. I couldn't afford to mess that up, but maybe I went too far. At first, it really wasn't planned. We had sort of a team lead, James. He didn't exactly hold a very high position in the firm, but he was a well-respected man, and his opinion mattered a lot. When I first started working at the firm, James was the single person who was nice to me. He tried keeping me updated, showing me around, trying to involve me in conversations. For the last part, that's how it seemed to me. I may have been wrong. Very wrong. They were all bastards in the place, James inclusive. I had to learn that the hard way. Being nice wasn't all he was. He'd been flirting with me since the first day we met, always inviting me to lunch, bringing lunch all the way to my desk sometimes, always trying to be in the same space as me. For the first 5 years I worked at the firm, I avoided him at cost. I didn't want anything that would jeopardize my marriage, let alone distract me from work. I was very ambitious then, and all I wanted was to make my marriage and job work simultaneously. When my marriage seemed to be failing, work was all I had anyway, and I didn't want anything to take my attention away. But it took me over a decade to realize that that wasn't exactly helping. I missed opportunities because of how uptight I had become. I avoided being in the same room or working on the same projects with certain people I thought were just flirts or just natural-born womanizers. And of course, people like James who seemed to just act nice so they could get under my skirt. And I thought my male coworkers didn't like me just because I was a woman. But I later found out that some actually respected me a bit at first, and I thought acting the way I did would bring me respect, and unknown to me it did, but it looked so bad on the outside that you wouldn't believe that it helped. James and I were working late night that day, and we had a deadline to meet up with. Chris had been trying to reach out to me all week, but I knew what he was going to say, that he was sorry he overreacted and wanted me to please come home, but I couldn't come home just then. I still had a lot to do at work. He called, texted, even reached out to my family members and begged them to get me to. Come home. He said he missed me and he was sorry. And I also really missed him and home and us. I was getting lonely. It's not like we spent much time together when we lived in the same house, but it was nice knowing someone was there and wanted me, and the occasional sex we had wasn't that bad either. But I was stuck with work, and James, of course. And it took a lot of willpower to turn him down night to night during that period. The occasional, you look so tired, how about you crash at mine? Or I give good massages, or let me drive you home. It was all just so tempting, I am not sure how I managed myself for so long. And so, on that night, after we had rounded up the paperwork, I felt so relieved and sort of happy. And it started with a massage, one I really, really needed because I was so worked up. But as that tension in my bones went away, I was overcome with something else, something more sexual, something I didn't even realize I was missing until then. I know I shouldn't have. In fact, a part of me knew back then too. It was the stupidest thing I had done since high school. At first, when he started with the caresses, the little but significant touches up my legs, I tried to stop him with my voice. But I really didn't have anything left in me to resist him with. No energy, no willpower, no self-control, nothing. I was completely vulnerable. And there was a very blur line between the massage and caresses. I couldn't tell when exactly he switched between the two. I kept muttering, We shouldn't. This isn't right. But he didn't say anything back, didn't stop either. And that was all I needed, all my body needed. In truth, I didn't want him to stop. I guess I was just trying to fulfill all righteousness, or whatever bit of it was left. Because I knew deep within me that if he had attempted to stop, I would have pulled him back. I was gone, and I knew that. And the worst part was we did it all in the office. But thank God, even in my most vulnerable state, I never slept with a man that wasn't my husband without using protection. And if I hadn't insisted that James use one, I would have been confused as to who Jesse's father truly was. The next day I went home to my husband. He was so happy when he saw me, and for how much he missed me. The broad smile on his face when he opened the door to me said it all. And I suddenly felt so guilty for sleeping with James. I took a day off work because I deserved it. I had worked so much all. Weak wrinkles started appearing on my face. He cooked dinner for us that night. It was a cool night, just the two of us. No work, no deadlines, and of course no kids. We enjoyed the silence and each other in it. The occasional smiles we gave each other when our eyes met from across the table made me feel like a teenager again. I miss such moments even now. The sex Jeremiah and I had that night was the most liberating I had had in a long time, and that somehow miraculously led to the birth of our beautiful baby, Jesse. I'll try not to bore you guys with the details of what happened during the pregnancy, as none of it is really important or related to this post. But summarily, things seemed pretty smooth. I got a maternity leave from work, just around 4 months only. I didn't want to slack at work or use my pregnancy as an excuse to become lazy. And after the work with James went well, I got put on more projects than I could imagine. But even though I tried not to become that lazy ass, my pregnancy wouldn't let me keep up. I got tired too easily and was always getting too emotional. Sometimes I suddenly started crying or I yelled at someone for something so little. My boss had to force me into that maternity leave in the end, and that left me with Jeremiah to take the heat all on his own. He, of course, was always there to satisfy all my cravings and take whatever form of aggression I threw at him. And finally, I gave birth. I stayed home for almost a year after that, breastfeeding the baby and stuff. If it was up to me, I would have resumed work a week after I gave birth to Jessie, but not under her father's watch, I couldn't. And you guys are probably wondering what all this backstory with James and all have to do with this post. Well, it has everything to do with it. Remember that I mentioned that James and I had sex in his office? Yeah. Well, the bastard got a hold of the CCTV from that night, and it became his own confidential property. When Jessie was almost a year old and I went back to work, things were different. Just within the span of a year, I was replaced. Not on paper, but it was obvious that I was now on lower ground. The firm claimed they needed continuity with the projects I had been put on, and that's why they had to put someone in my place. Even the younger women who were way inferior to me had suddenly become my superiors. It was all just frustrating, and James constantly reminding me that he could ruin what was left of my entire career with that footage didn't make anything better. I swore I'd never cheat on Jeremiah again, but I couldn't risk losing all I had worked for all these years. And I tried to look on the bright side. I convinced myself that having an affair with James couldn't be that bad, that he could actually help me work my way up again, but I was just being delusional. I wasted like 6 whole years of my life and marriage on him, and that wasn't fair. Not to Jeremiah, not to my baby girl, and not even to me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not exactly trying to play victim here, but the whole thing with James after we had Jessie was coerced. At least it was at first. But eventually it became part of my routine, work, James is back home, and over again. He started getting me really expensive stuff I knew I probably wouldn't use. But I liked the attention I got from him. My husband didn't have my time anymore. It was like all he cared about was our daughter. I understand that now, but at the time I interpreted it as him not loving me as much anymore. And I hate myself for even saying this, but back then I partially despised my daughter for that. For taking my place in the life of my husband. Because Jeremiah didn't adore me anymore. He didn't look at me like I was an angel anymore. Instead, he looked at Jessie that way, like she was the purest and sweetest thing in this world. I was jealous, and it reminded me why I personally never really bothered about having kids in the first place. They were very distracting. I believe Jesse would have distracted me from work and distracted us from our marriage. The second one was already happening on Jeremiah's side. But I told myself I wasn't going to let her affect my work again. I blamed her for what was happening at my workplace already. Jeremiah, on the other hand, kept trying to create a bond between my daughter and I, but I guess I was just so stupid and not having it. This went on up until early this year or so. Can't fully remember, but at that point she was so close to her father that it was almost like I didn't exist. She was frightened by my presence, stuttered every time she had to talk to me. At first I thought it was normal, and that's how she spoke, but one day, unknown to her, I overheard her talking and playing with her father. Her voice was so firm, so sound, not trace of a stutter. But suddenly, when I entered the room and she tried to greet me, it came as a stutter. I admit now that maybe because I was also strict with her, like yelling at her when she made a mistake, or came second in class and stuff like that. But despite the fact that at first I hated it that she was all that was ever on my husband's mind, I later convinced myself that she was my daughter too. And I really wanted the best for her, and her grades were an important factor in that case. She's a smart little girl, way smarter than me, but I wanted her to be strong, for her future, not mine. I was just trying to mold her right, and I feel very awful that punctured her confidence instead. I tried taking her to therapy because of this, but every time I went to pick her up, her therapist told me that there were no signs related to stuttering during the entire session. One day she called me in after their session and told me that she thinks Jessie may be afraid of me, that I should try being gentle on her sometimes, because she was too young and knew nothing of the world yet. I lashed out. To me, she was trying to tell me how to raise my own child. That was the last time me or Jessie ever went there. Our ride home was quiet, but I kept thinking about what the therapist said, and if it was really true that I was the cause of Jessie's problems. I was still furious when I got home, so I told her father. By this time, we hardly ever talked, only when necessary. I was busy with work and James, and he was busy with Jessie and work. We only ever talked about breakfast, and who would drop Jessie at school, or pick her up, or attend the PTA meetings her school invited us to. But I was so vexed by what the therapist said to me that when we went into our bedroom, I had to say something. But Jeremiah fueled my anger even more. He said maybe she was right, I was being a little too hard on the poor girl. He added that I could ask. Well, not just act as her mother if pushing her so hard was all I could do. And that's all he said. After that, he just turned over and slept, didn't even wait to hear what I had to say. I couldn't sleep well that night. Jeremiah was totally against the idea of taking our daughter to the therapist. He said there was nothing wrong with her, but I insisted. And it backfired hard. So that night, I told myself I wouldn't involve in anything that concerned our daughter anymore, since everyone thought I was such a bad parent for wanting what's best for her. Meanwhile, at the office, James had somehow convinced the higher-ups to include me on a business trip some of my co-workers were going on. At first, he made it seem like he gave up his spot for me, but the truth is that he didn't want to go in the first place. I, on the other hand, was happy that I'd get to leave home, because the whole thing with Jessie and her father was so frustrating that I thought I really needed a break from all the drama. But I noticed that some of the male coworkers that went on the business trip with us kept making passes at me. I ignored them all at first, because even though I was cheating on my husband with James already, I felt less or no guilt at all at that point, because it was just one steady person. But James hadn't come with us, in fact, with the whole Jessie thing going on. We hadn't gotten intimate in like a week, which is how long Jessie went to therapy for. And as for her father, I can't even remember the last time we shared a genuine kiss. So, naturally, I was lonely, with my affair partner 1,000 miles away. I started finding myself heating up inside even when one of the guys did as much as brushed their finger on my hand. It started with Sam. Sam was young, generally flirty, and in the stupidest way possible. He wasn't exactly charming in any way, and he was almost always the most pathetic and unreasonable guy in the room, but he was a guy regardless. He had a cock, and that's all it took to get me into his bed. I was in the hotel lounge one evening, after having such a long day at work. I had just gotten off a very brief video call with my husband and Jessie. Brief because our communication had become so poor. We only texted when I arrived, And even the call was because Jessie asked her father when I'd be back after the trip was postponed to last a few more days. As if Sam was waiting for the right time, he just appeared immediately when the other line went off. He offered me a drink and we got talking. My brain wasn't very active for the most part because of the combination of my dirty thoughts and the alcohol. He was putting on those tight shorts that made what was beneath almost as visible as it would have been had he been stark naked. It started with talk about the office and how people, especially our relationship partners, didn't understand just how demanding our job was. And suddenly, it felt like he could understand me and how hard it was, especially for a woman to make a name for herself in a field like mine. But that's just about all I remember. The next thing I knew, I was drunk to stupor, and Sam was having a bit of trouble carrying me all the way up to my room. He helped me take off my shoes when we got there, but I couldn't get my hands off him all the while. I didn't think much about it then, but he wasn't planning on leaving either. After he went to the corner of the room and took his shirt off, he came unto me, and I embraced him wholly. It felt like I hadn't been laid in years, and I guess because he was so young and full of energy, it felt different, new, liberating even. When I woke up the next morning, Sam was gone, and I missed the conference we had that morning. When everyone got back, I saw Sam walking hand in hand with one of the younger female colleagues who had come with us, and they were giggling so much together, it was disgusting. He didn't even spare me a glance. It was like the previous night was all in my head, and nothing ever happened between us. Sam was kind of out of the equation now, so how the hell did I not just go from James to him, but also to sleeping with 2 more of my coworkers on that trip? It was all just so stupid, really. But in my head, it was really smart. I had slept with 2 of my coworkers already, James, countless times, and not once had I ever gotten any significant benefit from it. I didn't ask for or even need any of the expensive stuff James got me. What I wanted was work-related benefits, and if they wouldn't give me that, I convinced myself I would get it by force. We had another coworker, 2 more actually, and the next day was our last meeting for the entire trip. And it was a very important one. We were closing a deal with high-class clients of ours, and I knew if somehow I happened to oversee that, I would be a hero back at the office, especially if the 2 people in charge couldn't make it to the meeting for some reason. I knew it was a desperate thing to do, but I was kind of desperate. So many years at that one firm, yet no one genuinely appreciated my efforts. The best they could do is informally demote me after just 1 fucking maternity leave. So I spent all day drafting a plan that could either mold my future or completely ruin it. When William came into my room that evening, I felt he had just made things easier for me. He was one of the 2 people in charge on that trip. He was younger than me, a constant reminder of how I had been cheated at the firm. He claimed he needed advice from someone more experienced than him. For a short period of time, I felt kind of important, that he acknowledged that I was way better than him at the job, and even valued my opinion. So for a very fleeting moment, I started rethinking what I planned, on doing and finding reasons why I shouldn't. But then he hit me with it. He wasn't looking for work advice, he was telling me about some girl he hooked up with, and the whole talk got intimate real fast, which was what I wanted. But it never occurred to me that he may have been manipulating me just to get under my skirt too, and that the whole story may have been a lie. After we had sex, I gave him something to drink, told him he needed to regain his energy. I watched him start drinking it before I left, because I had put some sleeping pills in it, in hope that he would actually oversleep. I knocked at Peter's door after that, and he was very welcoming. I should have known something was up, but I was so stupid, a fool at 37. I felt powerful, like I could seduce any man I wanted, like I was too hot to be resisted. I thought I was playing them, but it was actually the other way round, and by the time I found out, it was too late. I thought everything had worked as planned, and so I spent all night preparing for a presentation I never got to even pay attention to. Early the next morning, I took my bath and left the hotel before everyone else. William had left my room the night prior, after I gave him the sleeping pills. And I didn't come. I crossed him that morning, so my best guess was that it was working, and he wasn't going to be waking up anytime soon. To my dismay, these same 2 guys walked into the conference room about a minute early, looking very serious and more than prepared. I couldn't focus throughout. I kept asking myself how. I didn't want to believe that I threw myself at 2 younger co-workers for nothing, too. I felt uneasy and couldn't wait for the whole thing to end so that I could go home to the people I recognized. But those people didn't even recognize me back. They looked at me like I was a stranger. The evening before we traveled back, I noticed everyone looking at me weirdly and whispering things in each other's ears and giggling. Deep down, I knew they were mocking me. I had become the laughingstock of the group, the one with a failed dumb plan. And yes, they knew. I overheard them talking about it. All 3 men I slept with. I won't explicitly say what they said, but they said very mean things about my body and just laughed at it like it was nothing. They were even saying they couldn't wait to tell James and cash out from the bet. After that, I went up to my room and didn't come out till we were scheduled to leave. I was just a bet. Even the thought was terrifying. I thought I was playing them, but instead, I made a fool out of myself. Now, the team lead and everyone else was laughing at me. I instantly regretted all my actions, from the sex to the spiking. Only then did it dawn on me that my plan failing to work could bring consequences. I couldn't even face the men anymore. My confidence died with me that moment. I was not just ashamed, but afraid that they would file an HR complaint against me, and I knew it wouldn't stop there. I planned on staying away from the office for at least 2 days. I would call in sick for the period, but home wasn't going to be any better. When I got home, the welcoming wasn't exactly warm, but that wasn't new. I was used to the coldness at home already. But what I wasn't used to was having my parents and siblings show up at my door uninvited. At least I didn't invite them, Jeremiah did. And that day, he sent Jesse away to his sister's for the night. He didn't bother to give me any reasons, and I didn't bother to ask. When we were done with dinner, he decided to tell the entire family the reason for the sudden meeting. I could tell they all had no idea, because if they did, they wouldn't have managed to smile at me at all when they came in. My dad knew something was up, because Jeremiah wasn't one to call for attention unless it was important, and he had already told them it was urgent. Jeremiah got up and announced that we were getting a divorce. My heart literally skipped a beat. I never imagined the day would come when my husband of so many years would never want me. And what timing. Just when I had promised myself that I'd become a better wife and mother to our daughter and leave my cheating past, he decided he wasn't interested anymore. But I don't blame him for it. I was as shocked as the others on the table, but it's actually not his fault. He had every right to want a divorce. As if to answer the why question everyone had on their minds, he pulled out his phone and played a recording. It was Sam and I having sex, except Sam's face was blurred out. But that wasn't all. There were also pictures of me lying in the same bed as William and Peter. I had no idea when those were taken, and they both had the same date written on them. This time, my head started spinning. My family kept gasping in shock, and my mom started crying. My father didn't have any reaction. He just got up and left the table, said he never wanted to see me again. One by one, they all left, my brother holding my mom in his arms just to help her remain balanced. I know he probably hates me now, if not for anything, for making my mom cry in the first place. Jeremiah didn't waste any time either. He threw me out that night. Thankfully, I still owned my own house. That's where I've been staying ever since. I still hadn't gathered the courage to go back to work. It's been a couple of days now. Yesterday, however, I got an email from the HR. I won't disclose the content here. But I'm on an indefinite suspension, without pay, pending an investigation concerning serious work misconduct in violation of the company's Work Ethics Act. Simply put, I've lost my job and would probably be blacklisted in the entire industry due to my actions. My lawyer tells me I may be facing criminal charges too, eventually. If I'm lucky, I may get to pay a heavy fine and probation. Else, I don't even want to imagine what could happen to me. At this point, I need prayers too. And being unemployed is the least of my problems. My husband, on the other hand, is doing everything in his power to detach from me as soon as possible and keep our daughter away from all the drama. And personally, I really have a lot going on in my life right now. I also wish the process would be faster. I don't know what he has told my daughter about my absence. I don't know what I would tell her if I ever get to see her again. I just hope this whole thing with HR doesn't end up ruining my life. But what are the odds? My life is actually officially ruined.